Mega Man, Timmy Easy. Come on.
Welcome to Advocacy Help Desk, a network of advocacy leaders sharing best practices and new ideas via this free podcast to help everyone in government affairs get better at their advocacy craft and having a lot of fun while doing it. Now to today's great show.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Advocacy Help Desk. As everyone knows, and thank you again for listening this week, we are a group of advocacy professionals, PAC professionals, communications professionals, especially today, and government relations, public affairs, and everyone in between, talking about the advocacy challenges and PAC challenges that we all face on a day-to-day basis and with our work. As you know, follow us on Spotify. We're on iTunes, advocacyhelpdesk.com. My name is Brian Fratkin. I'm co-host of the Advocacy Help Desk and CEO of Spark Influence, an advocacy and PAC platform. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Blake from humanfactor.net, who makes all of this possible with his podcasting and video tools. And of course, Andy Polk, who helped to found this, but is unfortunately at work today and cannot get away. And with that, we are very lucky to be joined by the one and only Nick DeSarno from the Public Affairs Council. Nick, it's great to see you and your lockdown self in England here. How are you today?
Thank you. Good. We are on lockdown number 4, but we're making through it. I'm excited to be inviting one of our board members to talk today, who sits on the council's executive committee, actually. Katie McBreen, who is the Vice President of Communications and Strategy for the Consumer Brands Association. Previously, she's held various jobs in DC, always kind of in the communication space. She led communications at NRF. But if you haven't heard of the Consumer Brands Association, it's because while they were a very old association, it is a new name for them. I think Consumer Brands Association is one of like the oldest associations. Are they? Yeah, jump in.
I don't know the oldest, but we call ourselves the 100-year-old startup.
Ooh, yeah, over 100 years, yeah. And so with that, they recently rebranded, and those are some of the kind of questions that this show is going to center on, is specifically like how they rebranded their new website. And one of the things that I love about their new website is, and you can go and visit it right now, is there's a heavy data visualization piece. And so I just want to kind of pull the curtain back on how they took some of that data. They had a lot of great research in there about how their industry really plays into the American economy, jobs, those types of things, innovation, and sustainability. And so with that, Katie, can just give us some background on how Consumer Brands Association was kind of rebranded recently.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Brian, for both of you for having me. This is
welcome.
Fun to be here. I'm just realizing my backlight is not very good. Room would give me a terrible score for my backlight. But my branding would be.
But your branding is front and center, which is very important.
My cut shot here. So we, prior to becoming the Consumer Brands Association, we're the Grocery Manufacturers Association, one of the oldest institutions in Washington. And we, contrary to the name grocery, don't represent the retailer, represent the people who make the things in grocery stores. So as our CEO, Jeff Freeman, likes to say, the things in aisles 2 through 11. So everything from cleaning products and cereal to detergent and beverages, you name it, we're in your home. We did a bit of a survey and wanted to see the number of times that people interact with the products from our industry, and the average was 42. This all started with me wanting to count the number of products that I used in a day. My number is 65, and that was the day that I went to work and didn't interact with my kids. So I think it would have been much higher. But you get to a certain point where even your skincare, your morning skincare routine is about 15 products. So it's, we're in every home, everywhere, every day, and that's exciting. But our name and our agenda wasn't really where it needed to be. And so when Jeff Freeman, our CEO, came on, there was an effort to really focus on a strategy that united the entirety of the industry. So not just food and beverage, but also personal care and cleaning products. And as part of that, we did a rebrand, and we had a very the association wasn't in a great place when he took over. And it was for a number of reasons, things that had happened over a number of years, but never before had I been in a place where we sort of got to start fresh. And we were sort of this 100-year-old startup. And we did a number of things to inform our new name, but the new name was really just one piece of a broader rebrand in terms of a strategic agenda, our website, which is the manifestation of that agenda. And then now over the last year, we're coming up on January 14th on the year anniversary of our rebrand, really laying the foundation to be a powerful force for the industry. And we certainly have had to prove that over the last year and during COVID. And thankfully, all of the work that we did to rebrand the organization set a great foundation for our success moving forward.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I remember going to, I guess it was GMA's like website, and it was outdated. You know, it was clunky.
Outdated is kind.
Yeah. And so, and then you go, please visit their website. You go to their website now, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
How is it like marshaling that effort? Because we've done a small redesign, and it was a lot of work. I can't imagine this overhaul.
I think one of the benefits was that we did get to start from scratch. It was really like a startup. It wasn't look like we were trying to move all this content over. We didn't have a huge content migration that we did because we did have this new agenda that was very focused on these issues that unite the entirety of the industry and that CEOs were very focused on. And so starting from scratch is a lot easier than sort of taking old stuff and turning it into something new. Mm-hmm. So that was certainly a benefit. The other thing we really wanted to harness was the power of the consumer. And we are a very consumer-centric organization. And while advocacy-wise, our audiences and consumers, our company's number one audience is consumers. Mm-hmm. So we needed a website, a digital presence that articulated who that number one audience was, but still remained true to who we are as an advocacy organization.
Well, I love you mentioned, one, great points already. You mentioned strategic agenda a few times, right? That word just, it flows nicely into this. And I think that, you had a distinct challenge of rebranding, and we'll get to that in terms of discussing that from both externally and on the Hill, because obviously people didn't know who you were yet, but they sort of did already, and how you breached that. I want to get back to the strategic agenda concept though, is thinking through and what are the things that folks who either are rebranding or just updating their branding or just pushing their brand should be thinking about as you talk about the strategic agenda piece. What is that strategic? What does that mean? What are some quick things that they can be thinking about when they're thinking about, well, look, what are we doing? Who are we doing it for, right? What does it mean? Those kind of questions.
So for us, that meant going in and having some conversations with the leadership of the companies that we represent. And over the course of the year that Jeff was first on, our CEO, he had conversations with the different CEOs of our member companies. And what he found was there were some very consistent themes in terms of the issues that were top of mind for them. And as an advocacy organization, we need to make sure that we're advancing the priorities of those CEOs. And those themes came out pretty clearly, which was great for us because it did allow us to have this very focused agenda where we really felt like we could make an impact. And then taking that agenda, and then how do you represent that in a way that is both appealing and to the audiences here, and then, as I said before, reflects the consumer-centric nature of consumer packaged goods. And I think, data is a great way to do that. visuals is a great way to do that. You won't see pictures of Washington on our site for the most part. It's real people interacting with our products. And you won't see sort of the typical red, white, and blue, presidential blue of a trade association. I've got our new logo behind us. It's round. It has a very modern font. The colors are very modern. They're fresh. They're soft. All of these things are representative of the fact that we do represent this industry that is very consumer centric.
Nick, I know you talk about this a lot as well. I love that you just said, all right, great. Let's go talk to the top CEOs of the companies that we represent and ask them. And like that, but just in doing that, we talk about this at the Advocacy conference coming later this month, all the time though, of just make the ask, right? Just ask the people who are involved what their thoughts are, and they will tell you. And in this case, you're representing those top companies. Let's find out what they think we do and what they wish we did better, and mix the two of them into getting a consistent message out there. Nick, you're hearing that from a lot of different groups too, and other things of that sort.
And I think what probably Jeff and Katie and all them did was have to like edit down, right? Like see where this commonality is, because I think, it's hard for a lot of trade associations right now to, everyone is a stakeholder, right? And everyone's an important stakeholder. And, you have to find that line that runs through them, the commonalities, and say like, listen, for 5 of these members, this is their top issue, but for 15 of our members, this is their top issue. And that top issue is they don't, for that 5 doesn't agree with those. So let's not talk about that, right? And you got to have those difficult conversations. And I think that's what like leadership that is really effective does. They go in, they have those difficult conversations, and they can build consensus through that. And I think, I think Jeff said experience at leading other associations. And so I think that really helped him. I also think, generally speaking, when you're doing one of these rebrands, it's that you have a lot of new, fresh talent at these organizations. And so they're providing a different perspective. I think when you've sat at an organization for 25 years, it is hard. I'm on 5 years at the council, and sometimes I'm like, man, the Advocacy conference, I have to come up with some new ideas to make this like fresh and exciting. It's definitely more difficult than where year one, I had a bank of things that I wanted to see because I used to attend that conference. And so it's I think it's helpful when you have some fresh blood in there and that can look at things maybe a little bit differently. Katie, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was that you guys have all of this interesting research that you clearly did, when you went to go launch. And then you kind of put some visualizations behind that. How did that kind of process work out? Like if you go on their website, you can click around and learn about kind of the industry. I think it seems like that's a real big focus of your website. That's something that we get asked about a lot. We need to make a case to a legislator about how we're impactful and they should pay attention to us. Mm-hmm. And previously it used to look like a really boring white piece of paper, but now it's looking like, well, come to our website, look at this video, look at this, click around on this map and see how it, affects your state. Can you give us a little more background on that?
I think having economic and jobs data about your industry is table stakes. It's just expected, and we didn't have it, and which was really unfortunate for us because the key audience of our companies, and I feel like I just keep repeating this word consumer, but consumer also equals constituent. And so if you can't go up to Washington and talk about how your business or your industry impacts constituents, you've lost members of Congress right there. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, we did a study with PwC to measure the economic impact of our industry. It's broken down into congressional district, and it's been great data to go in both from a visual perspective and then just the data perspective and talk about the impact of consumer packaged goods in this country. We're the #1 manufacturing sector in the United States. We employ 2.3 million people, and It's just sort of that foundational data. Now, I always say nobody tells their kids bedtime statistics. They tell them bedtime stories. And so you can have great data, but if you don't back it up with great stories, you're really not leveraging that data in a way that's impactful. We have found, I think, and I'll give a couple of examples of where we've been able to take that data and really use it to move our advocacy priorities. So first, obviously, laying the foundation to show, okay, hey, we're big, we're important, we're in every district in the United States. That's number one. Number two, it has really been helpful during the pandemic because 1.7 of our 2.3 million workers are essential. And when we had debates or when we were looking to influence the government in terms of making sure that our essential workers could get to work when there were lockdowns and shutdowns and when they were being pulled over at night because they were going in for the night shift to work. Having that data has been really helpful in talking to government, in talking to reporters. And now we're using that same data in talking about vaccinations. So our workers are ready to be vaccinated in phase 1B. We were very active in making sure that with the CDC and ACIP, which is sort of the vaccination group within CDC, to make sure that our essential workers were included in phase 1B. And having that data about who those workers are was a really compelling story to tell. And I literally say those numbers every day with reporters, and having it is just a great resource for every piece of what we do from a communication standpoint.
I love that you talked about kind of marrying the data and the stories. I mean, when we talk about how you kind of affect, change and influence people, a lot of times you can rope them in with a story, you can get them interested, but to make that policy ask, you have to have that data to back it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can pull on their heartstrings about an issue, right? You can talk about, maybe an employee who had to travel an hour and a half and, has to drop off their kid at their mother's house and all these types of things so that they can go and make sure that, toilet paper remains on the shelf, which is actually a concern, right? And then you can say, 1.7 million of our workers are similar to that, right? And it's like, okay, well, now this is an issue that I, a member of Congress, have to address because it's not just, that one, person who works in that factory. It's a lot. Yeah. That's a great point. So I guess kind of in wrapping up, you've done a ton of different things, with the rebrand. It's kind of gone through all of your messaging, your website, your social media handles. Like every time you're probably thinking like, oh, this is another thing that we have to think about. What has been kind of the most fun or exciting piece for you to work on?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think seeing it all come together, and it's funny. Just yesterday, I was looking back. So when I started here, we weren't using any real email marketing software that provided great analytics on communications to our members, and that was one of the first things we did. And we wanted to be very deliberate about the rebranding. It wasn't like we were just redesigning a logo. We were changing our name. We were starting a new organization. So there was this year where we were trying to bridge the gap of the old and the new. And I looked back at the first all member email that we sent using our email marketing software. And we kind of tried to freshen up the old logo and make it look more modern. And at the time, it was such an improvement from where we had been. And now I look back at it and I go, oh my gosh, we've come so far in such a short period of time, really, that I think that's the most rewarding. And the team and the organization, all the people in the staff, it really was this collective effort to become who we are today. And it did, to see the impact and our ability to really make a difference for our members during the pandemic has been a really rewarding experience.
Yeah.
Katie is also the chair of the association network for the Public Affairs Council. She always writes a great column, and I always kind of really look forward to reading it and learning some stuff. And so I just appreciative of you. You're really busy. You're at a new kind of organization that's doing a lot and has been affected by the pandemic tremendously. And so that you're always willing to give us so much time, both at the council for this podcast, to just help people that have questions. I send a lot of people to Katie when they're starting out at a new position and they're, confused about maybe how they're supposed to lead a team, or how they're supposed to maybe rebrand or do some of these, kind of cutting edge things that Katie has been known for. And so I appreciate your time. And I know Brian wants to wrap us up, give us some good points.
No, Nick knows me too well. All these points though, I love it. One, the 100-year-old startup, great concept. They talk about day one thinking, right? Not getting into a lull and complacency, but really thinking how you can rethink yourself and continue to move forward. You're one, the aisles 2 through 11. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. We're not produce and we're not over here, but we're everything in between. But your conversations and your strategic planning and your different pieces, it's what we think about with advocacy all the time of, who is our audience? What is our goal? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do here? Right. And it's just thinking and taking that from the advocacy world to the branding world and saying, great, or both ways of saying, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is our goal. And then asking the questions of those people. And as both of you have said, sort of streamlining, that's where leadership comes to play, is saying, what are the answers that we really want to push forward with, that we really want to take out into the world? But this has been fantastic, Katie. Your concepts and your ideas of just the table stakes piece, you're absolutely right. More organizations need to be able to say at a moment's notice, here's our impact with this district or with this state or with this legislator or whatever it is, just so that we can start somewhere. But I do love your comment of nobody tells kids bedtime statistics. I'm going to steal that. I think that's fantastic because you're right. And it's what we talk about at the advocacy conference and just at different PAC events all the time is data only gets you so far, but if without a good story, but a story only gets you so far without a good data, and the two together really come together in one. So thank you, Katie, for a fantastic episode. Nick, thanks again for joining us from the UK. Godspeed, God bless, good luck. This has been another great episode of the Advocacy Help Desk. You can find us on Spotify, on iTunes, on advocacyhelpdesk.com, on YouTube, and everywhere in between. And as Andy Polk likes to say, keep advocating.